And we are live. Greetings and salutations, beautiful beings. You can see that I have brought guests. Yes, we're going to have a great discussion today about story and structure. But just as we go live, I want to hear from you. How are you doing? How has your day been? It's Saturday in most time zones, so I want to hear what you've been busy with and what your world building plans are. Now, before we go any further, I must introduce my guests, who are far too modest, of course, to introduce themselves. So I have, of course, Leon Conrad, weaver of words and spinner of stories, who loves helping writers, storytellers, and story lovers, that's you guys, improve their understanding and use of story. His latest book, Story and Structure, has won a number of awards, including the IPNE Nonfiction Book of the Year, and has been shortlisted for the People's Book Prize. And I've read the book. It's really fascinating. If you'd like to go and help, I think you can go and vote on your website. Isn't that correct, Leon?
The voting is closed, but
Shock.
visit the website because you can sign up for goodies and downloads and excerpts and treats of all kinds.
There we go. Let me. Oh, second hand summarize way ahead of me. Let's just pop that onto the into the chat. But you can go and find Leon Conrad at leonconrad.com. Very nice. And yeah, check out more about all of the things he does and this excellent book and the theories behind it, which we're going to be discussing in more detail today. Very exciting. And of course, not forgetting the great Chris Chilton, writer, entrepreneur, and kinesiologist. Yes, I had to practice that word. What is a kinesiologist?
Essentially, we combine an energy therapist. So we help rebalance the body, promoting innate self-healing and drawing on traditional Chinese medicine and the use of muscle testing. So it's a
Wonderful.
combination of various different skills.
Very interesting. But of course, you are here today as a GM speaking on behalf of GMs everywhere about how story and structure and the methods behind it can help GMs, help us tell more compelling stories around the table with dice and friends.
Absolutely.
Looking forward to it. So, yeah, you can find Chris on Chris's website, which is not imaginatively, but very cleverly, chrischilton.co. Go and check him out and find some of your writing there too as well. So I'm really looking forward to this. But I have to ask, Leon, you wrote a whole book about story and structure, and it is great, guys. I did get to read it. It's wonderful. What kicked off this? What was the thing that made you need to write this book? Because nobody writes a book like this unless they need to.
Good question, Janet. It all started in a comfortable chair with me, cup of coffee in my hand, reading a book on narrative, because narrative and story is my thing. And the author, who is somebody I respect and admire greatly, came up with a claim that what makes the story of Cinderella is a question we will never be able to answer with precision. That stopped me in my tracks. I thought, how do you know? How come? Those are the kind of questions I like. Questions we don't yet have satisfactory answers to. Questions that get underneath my skin and torment me until I find a satisfactory answer to them. It may not be the definitive answer. It may just be a beginning step along the road to a new understanding. But hey, 10 years later, here's the book.
Amazing. 10 years in the making. So there are a lot of books about writing. Obviously, there are a lot of books about writing structure. Tell me a little bit about your approach, because I found it so interesting.
There's some key differences and there are key similarities. Let's look at some of the similarities. Everybody looks at story. Stories have beginnings, middles, and ends. They have different shapes. And very many people have written about the binary quality, the toing and froing, the ebbing and flowing of story. That's nothing new. What's different about my work is that I use 6 simple, visually intuitive symbols to chart those different middles. And one of them is the backward barb, the backward step, and the other is the forward barb. And because they're visual, because they're content free, they link you to the underlying energy that drives story. And that is something that is new. The other thing that's new is that it distinguishes very clearly, with very clearly defined terms, between story structure, which is what happens at the time of the tale in individual character storylines, where the events happen in chronological order, on the one hand, and on the other hand, plot patterns, which is what happens at the time of the telling. You can tell a story in any order, and as long as you know exactly what events you need to cover for the story to have a complete holistic feel by the time you get to the end, it doesn't really matter what order the events come in. There is story logic, so you can't do anything, but a lot is allowed and will make sense. And that's one of the key differences I found.
That's really interesting. So you broke down narratives from everything from traditional stories to novels to riddles. I believe I remember an opera in there or two. A lot of different kinds of media, a lot of different kinds of storytelling. And you found, as people have found before, there were different categories of story structures. Can you tell me a little bit about those categories? Like, what's the list? What categories did we have by your recognition?
Okay, so I found 18 easily identifiable story structures.
Yeah.
They're patterns of events. What makes one story structure different to another is the number of events that are needed to tell a bare bones version of a particular story. Obviously, you can expand. A story can last days if you wanted to. But the bare bones are what makes a story structure a story structure. What some story structures have in common is that they start with a backward step, some kind of negative or tension event. An event that does not propel the character towards their goal. Other stories, like the Rags to Riches, like the Cinderella story, start, in my categorization, with a forward step, a positive thing. The version of Cinderella that I work with, which fits the Rags to Riches structure, is that at the beginning, the family is happy. There is no problem until the mother dies, and that's when things go haywire.
Sure. So it's essentially what you're tracking really is these high points and these low points, these things like try-fail cycles where, you know, somebody tries something and they succeed, or something happens as a setback, essentially. And this is where, you know, we get to this sort of flow, essentially, which is the sort of the DNA of a story, if you like.
Yes, and I'd be interested here from Chris how this works in practice, because I'm a story structure consultant, but I'm not a gamer. And you guys need to know how this works in real life.
Well, this was actually
This
this was
is true.
exactly going to be my next question, is how is this information helpful for us when we're doing the thing? And let's start with Chris and gaming. How has this been helpful for you as a DM, as somebody you know, doing collaborative storytelling with players in a space?
Yes. Well, the first thing I'd recommend is read the book and then forget about it for a while, to soak all the information in. One of the key aspects I've used to sort of help me get into the word flow is this forwards backwards contraction expansion. That's a natural force in the world we live in. It's the same for the yin and yang energies. There's expansion and contraction. So for me, there's this constant tension between going towards, away, building, but it's not how, whether it's good or bad is kind of context derivative. The point is, this is a motion that is happening and is required to happen. So it's just an innate part of storytelling at any point, whether it's 3, it's 5. And the beauty of Leon's work is that it's the minimum steps you have to take. So in some ways, once you've kind of memorized the basic steps, you can just go, I know which point I'm at. Am I at the journey? Am I at the problem? Is this a meeting? What kind of meeting? So there's an element for me I found that simplifies the occasion without trying to. I found that I was always trying to emulate those I really liked watching or playing or reading. And so there was always a nagging bit in the back of my mind that was saying, you've got to be original though. You know, you don't want to rip someone off. So there was an element of, by reducing it to this sense of, these are the tools we all use. These are the fundamental, they're just the structure, the scaffolding, if you will. And it helped me relax. And so in that sense, I was able to sort of sit back and not feel like I had to create anything. And it was more just allow my creativity to come forward.
Oh, I love that.
It was just really helpful. I don't know, for me, I'm a bit of a perfectionist. I've got a graveyard of stories on my computer that will never see the light of day. But it's over these last couple of years that I've really sort of been able to let go of what my this idea of comparing myself. Comparison is a thief of joy, unfortunately. And I felt like as a younger writer, I was definitely cheating myself out of certain things. But with the simplification and the fact that it's kind of universal, it just kind of helped me step back, and then I could reapproach, and then I could tell where I was sort of overbearing or just not giving it enough time. They have J.K. Rowling has that wonderful, is it too much shed or not enough lake? There's that wonderful sort of, where am I? So I could sort of feel my way in. And in some ways, the best advice Leon gave me was allow the story to come forward. And if you have the structure, it just does. It naturally happens. We are innate storytellers. And so to visualize it, it's kind of like the geometry of story. That's how I kind of picture it. I have this sort of, the basic shapes, the patterns. And for me as a dyslexic, that was really useful to have a sort of visual concept to grasp upon. So I think that's one of the most powerful things, this visual representation that you can easily mark. So I could be mid-story and be like, oh, that could work. So I'll map out, is this a quest? Okay, what's happening? And I just have the little marks next to it. And then I can reduce the whole story down to a sentence. And you've got a story, and you've got 4 or 5 sentences. And as I've always looked up to writers who've kept it simple and trying to keep it as simple as possible and the minimum number of words if you can. And I find that's a great way of being able to, in the moment, jot something down and to sort of remind myself, keep grounded. Don't get too far away.
For those of you wondering who have not yet read this book, the quest is an opening, a statement of the current situation. And it is then, can I find it in the book? Of course not. That would be far too helpful. Here we go.
Appendix 4.
Huh?
Page 464.
464. What a beautiful number. So essentially, what we're looking at is after the initial situation, there's a back step, a forward step, a back step, a forward step, a back step, a forward step, and then you get the final situation. And really, that's what you're talking about. Now, there's more to it. There's, the first back step is always a problem because you need an inciting incident, right? And then there's a journey because, our heroes can't solve the problems where they are. No, they have to go on the grand tour. And then there's meetings and there's enemies, but essentially that's the basic structure. So if you want to write a quest, you can take the basic structure, which I will show you right here, and you can say, okay, I already have the plot beats. I already know the big things that need to happen, and this is how I can construct my narrative. Is that correct?
Yeah, may I add that the
Please.
story structures, again, another unique thing about this book, are all linked to an individual character's storyline. So the game master will have their own storyline. Each character will have their storyline. Where characters' storylines intersect, there will be meetings.
Yeah.
And those meetings are always, in the methodology here, marked as backward steps. Because as soon as 2 characters meet, they have to stop, have a conversation. That stops the story from going forward. It's only when you know the outcome of that conversation that you know whether that will drive either of the characters forward towards their goal, whether it will set them back, or whether it gets more complex. It could be a trickster step, and that's a double barb. You're not going forward. You're not exactly going backward. It's a kind of, I don't really know what's happening here. It's a move.
Something significant is happening, but we don't necessarily know what it is yet.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah,
I found that. Oh, sorry.
sorry.
I just wanted to say I found that fascinating that meeting a new character was considered a backward step. That completely changed the way I understand character introductions, which whether you're playing around a table or you're writing a story, character introductions are one of those things that you always want to spend a little bit of extra time on, get really right. The idea for me that they're a backward step, that was fascinating to me.
And it's not to do with a negative feeling at all. It's to do with the energy of the story. At that point, it ebbs.
Yeah.
And then it'll flow forward again. But enjoy the ebb.
Yeah, Chris, you were going to say.
Absolutely. I mean, that was one of the hard things that took me a while to get my head around, because I've worked with Leon. We reconnected in 2018, and that's it was sort of towards the first drafts had been created, and so we had lots of conversations over a year, and it stumped me for a while. And as he said, it's about removing the good and bad. It has to happen, because with the quest you have two parts to a meeting. You have enemy or hindrance, and you have friend helper.
Yeah.
And that's key. You have to have those two individuals to give you both sides to balance out whatever it is. And the beauty of the quest, it's every essay you've ever written. That's all it is. It's every essay. And so there's this, and when I know what you mean about introducing a character, because, I spent ages crafting this perfect introduction. I was very excited, and then the players went that way. And I was like, no, don't leave me. Don't do this to me. I've spent so much time. And that's when I realized the meeting is the meeting point to pause back, to give you that space, to give you that broad perspective under the sort of narrative, because the journey carries on of these meetings. The meetings are a subsection of the journey. So you're in this container of the journey. And a meeting can take, as we said before, you could take days explaining a meeting, or it could be a moment. And I think that's the beauty of this. It works in the macro and the micro. So in terms of application, I found that a meeting is a great opportunity to take stock, to pause, and then give my players three roads, like a forked path. I mean, they're all leading to the same place, because, the story has to move forward, but how they get there is up to them. And then it makes my life a little bit easier, because then I can sort of, for instance, classic scene, you're at a bar, in a tavern, there's a character over there. And I made the big mistake when I was first starting out of investing a lot in one particular way of it unfolding. So now I look at it now and I go, right, well, this is the setting where the meeting takes place. And I know that they need to get to the next meeting point, which might be a repeat, or it might be the next baddie. You don't know where it's going. It depends on the narrative, because these can be expanded exponentially or shortened down. So then I was able to sort of say, well, as long as they get there, how they get there gives them freedom and it doesn't railroad them. And then I can play different characters. So I might have one looking a bit dodgy, one's looking very sort of prim and proper. So depending on, it gives them choice. And I think that's what's really important, is you're able to step back and see where you're trying to give them choice, whereas instead just laying choice in front, because you know where you're going to go. And so therefore you can retell it in various different ways. And I think that's quite fun for me. I have three potential characters to jump into. I mean, they're all the same character really, but there's a different angle. And then that's what's interesting about that, is you can give them a different energy to propose forward. So I always try and give them, there's an option to fight, or there's an option to get around it. And you can build that into your story structure depending on who they interact with, as a group or as an individual. So it's a great way of taking a lot of pressure off, but also reopening up the board at the same time.
Wonderful. Now, I feel like we must address this question of flow, because it's coming up so much, and this is really the heart of what your analysis is about. Can you speak to the importance of flow in stories? Can you tell us really what this means and why it's so important?
It's like time, Janet. Time flows forward. But as we've talked about, story structure generally has this ebb and flow to it. And you feel it build, particularly when there's a suspenseful sequence. And I'll talk about that slightly later. What I discovered in doing the research, applying this view to story and finding out how they worked, looking at it through this lens, was that there is one story structure that does not have any backward steps.
Huh.
And it's the creation myth structure. That's the name I've given it.
Later, yeah.
It's the story of creation as it unfolds in Genesis 1. In the beginning, God created whatever he created, or God looked around, he said, let there be light, and there was light. And then he said, let there be this, and there was this. It's not because there was a problem, that there was a lack. It's just he said, let there be light, there was light. And God looked around and saw that it was good. On the second day, he did this. I think that is where story wants us to go. And all these story structures, which have backward, forward moves, which involve different worlds, which involve these moves, all lead us to this desire to flow.
I think that's the key word, desire. And I think if there's one thing I've been aware as a GM is the desire of the group as a collective. We're playing long games. These go on for, I'm in a game at the moment, it's about 1.5 years, now 2 years. And we try and do 2 weeks, but lives. So kind of picking up on the desires of the group and using that to drive the story is a great way to be sensitive, and being sensitive to that is, and by knowing the structures, you pick up on it with familiarity and engagement. You sense it, and then you can almost sort of encourage this desire to manifest, and it will, because I feel that stories have a sense of wanting to complete. No one wants to leave anything half done, and I think stories have that same energy. They want to move on, or they want to complete, and I think that's really key.
That's really interesting. So how can you manage this flow? How can you know when you've gone backwards enough or forwards enough, essentially? How do you know when you've balanced?
I've always, the best games are the ones when you get to the end of it and everyone goes, oh. So it's kind of you're just going to have a bit of a feedback loop. You're going to just pick it up over time. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to be too many meetings or not enough meetings. And you're going to have to feel into it. It's a kind of an emotional thing, I find. You can logify your way into everything, but you can't necessarily transcend. And so if it's building, just allowing yourself to make mistakes, bouncing in and out, and just reading the room, it's only a few times, but when my players or the people I play with go, oh, great game, guys, like, thanks. This is like, we're all tired. It's been a long day or whatever it is. And we'll go, yeah, that was really worth it. Then you'll go back and you'll have a little think about, okay, what did I do? How did I do that? Did that come out? And again, I found I used to be too many meetings. That was one of the things I used to do. I used to introduce too many things. And after a while, you just can't keep as much track on it. So again, you've got to read the room. You'll find the beats, and you just got to emotionally tune in. I think that's what I'd recommend, and feel into it, and then you'll just get a flow for it. It will it writes itself. This is the wonderful thing. This is why I love D&D. You can never write it. You're not supposed to. You're just supposed to let it go, and it comes back to you. And that's the best part. But,
That brings me very nicely to my question for Leon, which is, how do you manage this in writing? Because, of course, D&D is kind of performance art. Once it's happened, it's happened. Once the story's got away from you, do you know what? That you just have to fix it in post, No GM is above a retcon occasionally, although we try not to. But
damage limitation.
Absolutely. But for putting my writer hat on, for we writers, we are in the enviable position where we can change things, we can restructure, we can go back and rewrite. In fact, we seem to spend most of our time doing that. So how there can we make that adjustment? Can we know if we've got the flow correct, forward to back? What are the tells that we can pick up on as writers looking at our own work?
Mm-hmm. Good question. For me as a writer, I think planning is vital. And for planning, I use story structures to plot individual characters' storylines. Much depends on inspiration, playful attitudes to seeing what character wants to manifest, and what their problem, inciting incident, desire, longing is. Because that is what will dictate the particular story structure that their storyline follows. For instance, if a character faces a problem that it is within their power to solve, then a quest structure will naturally unfold. And these keys are in the book, if you're interested. If a character faces a problem that is not within their power to solve, then there's a story structure that naturally brings in a higher power. And that's the call and response structure. There are two variations of it. And it deals with the relationship between the world of mortals and the world of transcendent beings. There is a link, and a very interesting link. Another of the things that came out, that an excess of goodness often brings forth a demon, and an excess of evil brings forth an angelic force. And if you have that notion of balance and that understanding of this very natural story structure that operates within and from our consciousness, then you're going to flow with the grain of the brain. And it's going to be much easier. You're going to be more relaxed. The people you're working with are going to have more fun, and it'll feel more natural. It won't feel forced or pushed.
I like that. Also, I like the saying of the grain of the brain. I'm here for it. Yes, 100%. So we've talked about the big concepts, and I think that we have an idea of sort of how your approach works. Could you could double act this if you want to. I'm 100% here for it. Could you give us a breakdown of the 18 story types, just with, imagine you were introducing them at a dating show. Just one little line of like where they like to get coffee and what their pets are.
All right, I'll do. Shall we take them in turn, Chris?
Yeah, let's give it a go. I've got the book here, so I'm gonna just have a quick checkup.
I scared them, guys. I scared them. Sorry.
No, it's all good.
I am the quest structure. I will help your character arrive at their destination using the tools and powers they have naturally, their own problem-solving skills. Maybe they'll meet a friend or helper who will give them a magical object or show them that they have the power to help themselves, but it's all within their hands.
I love this. I'm so glad I asked for this. I'm going to ask for this every time from now on. Chris, please go ahead. So that was the quest. Next up we have...
should we go for the revelation structure next? Does that work?
Yeah, if you want.
The revelation structure. I complete myself at each step, and I am tied to the glorious number of 3, the smallest shape you can make with 3 straight lines. The beauty of this is it's best summed up in the phrase, I came, I saw, I conquered. Neatly folds in, completes, and it's prevalent in most of the stories that we listen to, have around us, culture, religion, across the board. This is the 3-part act. I am there at all times. I am the first structure you need.
Amazing.
I am the transformation structure. I go bing bang. I am the power behind the intervention of divine beings. They see a problem, pung, they solve it. There is no thinking, there is no cogitation, there is no hesitation. It goes backward, forward, bang.
Amazing. So that was transformation. Next up we have...
Oh, what have we got next? What should we do next? Trickster?
Rags to
Trickster. I'll do Trickster. I am the trickster. I am the one that comes to you with gold, but it's not, it's actually copper. But you won't know that till you've gone, and I've gone the other way. I am the one who saw you coming from a while. I am Saul Goodman. I saw I saw your weakness and I took advantage. I am Slippin' Jimmy. Beware who I am. I will come for you.
I am the rags to riches structure. I start positive, but very often there is a bolt from the blue that changes the positive to the negative. Oh, but wait. Soon there will come a divine being, because from that excess of evil always comes good. And the fairy godmother, or that divine being, will elevate you, the character, following this rags to riches structure, from this state of subversion to a state of elevated realization. But it won't last forever. You go back down there in that state of subversion. You revert to the previous state of being, but in an altered state of consciousness.
Interesting.
When that happens, a savior character has to come out and go on a quest of their own. By solving their own quest, they will solve your problem, and you will together find the riches.
Now, I have to say, I'm going to just insert myself into this amazing display of role playing, which I didn't know I had asked for, but I'm 1,000% here for. Like 1,000%, just to be clear. I found this one particularly interesting because there is a little mini quest within the maxi quest. Essentially, with the Rags to Riches story, there's the moment where everything's been getting better. Of course, there have been try-fail cycles. Things have got better. Things have got worse, but things have got better. Net gain. And then something happens to revert them back to that first state. And then you see them, there's a small quest that gets them to the finish line, that gets them to this sort of pinnacle point again. Which A, is fascinating, and B, is also representative of a lot of romance narratives where, you know, it's growing, things getting better. And then, of course, the romance falls apart for whatever reason. They're thrown back to stage one. And then there's that mini quest. That's the running through the airport scene in every single romance novel or movie you've ever seen, which is that mini quest that where they're like, oh, I've got to do all the work all over again, but I only have this long before the book finishes. I thought it was fascinating. Just wanted to say that. Really, really interesting.
Yeah, that's a brilliant structure, and it always requires that sort of external, and it's most often mystical. That's that friend who goes, "You're an idiot. What are you doing?
Yeah.
Run on." So that's a lovely aspect, and that's the beauty of the structures. It just nests in itself, and the distinction of these structures is just based on their uniqueness, you know, and how common they are across all the stories we have. You know, what do we have next?
Do you want to do Death and Rebirth?
Death and Rebirth. Ah, yes. So Death and Rebirth. This is the story of the story of poverty. You're in it's a negative place. There's things have gone wrong. Life has been hard. It's been difficult. You have a lack, and so you go on a journey to fulfill this lack. This lack is never given to you. It always comes at a price. Always. There's always a price to pay. And what happens is that sometimes it takes many attempts to pay this price. Many attempts. And sometimes, correct me.
There is an attempt to avoid paying the price.
There we go. Which doesn't necessarily make it tragic. It just makes it tense. It brings a suspension and the aspects through the story. And either by failing or trying attempt to put this right, a savior character is always involved. There's always some sort of savior character that comes either to the rescue or to extract, for want of a better word, the pound of flesh, to then complete the story. Again, there's a nested quest structure at the end of this one, very similar to the Rags to Riches, but the key difference is how it starts, and also it's not necessarily tied to a quest, but there is some sort of nested structure that has to come through. And at the end, balance is restored, whether it's for the good or for the bad. Balance is always restored, and the lack is either fulfilled or completed.
Really interesting.
I am the trickster variation structure. I embody a meeting between two characters. But unlike the trickster structure, one character has no intention of duping or tricking the other. There is just the element of surprise. There's a huh moment. You what now? As one of my students likes to put it. As a result of that huh, there has to be another nested mini quest, perhaps a trickster structure, that will eventually and needs to resolve to an bringing the story to a close.
Nice. So there's that suspension and then the release of the suspension. Really interesting. Okay, so that's trickster variation. What's next?
8
next
and 9 call and responses.
8 and 9, yes, the call and response. I mean, the best connection of story that we've talked about, Leon, it's the Star Wars story. It is the immediate turn, the light to dark, the dark to light, which kickstarts a quest, whether it takes a day or years or a lifetime. This quest has begun. It starts to unfold. This must be completed, and it has to follow the revelation structure. It has to go and have its full completion. And it's at the end of this quest that we have a rebalancing. So whether it's dark to light, it finds its harmony once again, and the universe is at peace.
Unless the rebalancing is excessive, which starts it on another cycle to try to find balance. Very often, it being excessive on the other side.
That which cages you, that which frees you, can often become your cage. This is the story of this is the structure for that story.
So the two variations of the call and response are dependent on whether the Big Bang comes at the beginning and then the revelation structure unfolds from there, or whether the revelation structure leads towards the Big Bang in a suspenseful sequence of events.
So yeah, so the first part of Star Wars would be call and response, call and response 2, and then the second part would be call and response 1. So it's a lovely sort of mirror between the two.
I love that. And again, that goes into the theory of flow and balance, right? Really
Yes.
interesting.
Yes. And so they all talk about bringing balance to the
Bringing
to the
balance
force.
to the force.
Balance
Yeah,
to
exactly.
the force.
Shall I take
Okay.
the Kisho Tenketsu structure?
Yes, please. That's the one I was slightly worried about.
The Kisho Tenketsu structure is a story structure found in Asia across many cultures, and it starts out with a situation, a scene, a description, a character, some kind of bit of information. It's elaborated. And then, with no warning, something comes out, completely unexpected, completely unrelated. And you're thinking, huh? Where did that come from? But the Kisho Tenketsu structure leads on to a conclusion which gives you the seemingly unrelated relation between those two things. That was a terrible way of describing it. The unexpected connection between the two is what I meant to say.
Can you repeat the name of that one? Our audience is asking.
Of course, the Kisho Tenketsu structure.
There we go.
Exactly.
You see a lot of these in anime, huge amounts. It's very much, let's take Dragon Ball Z. He finds another level of power that came out of nowhere that we never saw before. And it's the same. Oh my God, they've got a move I've never seen before. It's very much this sudden, unexpected, and then once it happens, you're like, oh yes, of course. And then it sets up the tone for the rest of the stories.
And a variation of that structure is the open-ended Kisho Tenketsu structure. That's listed separately in the classification because the story spinner doesn't bring the story to the conclusion. They leave that paradox open. How are these two things connected? The story seeker has to go on a little quest and find their own explanation to bring the open-ended Kisho Tenketsu structure to its natural close.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Really interesting.
Do you want to do the dilemma structure, Chris?
Yes.
Ooh, I don't know if you're
Could
sure
you
or
do the
not.
dilemma? And do you mind if I do the Chinese secular structure? Is that okay?
Leave that till last.
Leave that till last. Okay. Can I do the koan? Would it be all right to do the koan? This is one of my favorite structures because it's a story. The story only comes about because it's realized. It is a moment. It is a connection. It is that light bulb, that aha. It just pings, and it's fleeting. It's never something you can hold on to. You just have a residue of it. You're there. You're connected, and it sort of fades away. But it's still poignant, and it's a realization. It's just that. Which is a lovely. It's one of the structures that really gives me quite an emotional, physical response, and I think that's what I like about it, because you sort of it's something you resonate with. It's you have to have that resonation, otherwise it's not completed. You can't logify your way into it. You can't necessarily be creative your way into it. It's that perfect union of the two things together, and that's what's lovely about it.
I am the dilemma structure. I start off with a problem that needs to be solved. So there is a journey. On that journey, there comes a crossroads. That crossroads allows you to face a paradox. Should we go left? Should we go right? Who's right? Who's wrong? Which character is the most worthy? It is left open-ended. What you make of it is up to you. The dilemma structure is one of a family of open-ended structures that demands engagement from the story seeker with the story spinner to bring it to a close. There has to be consensus. There can be argument, there can be disagreement, but to bring it to a close, there has to be consensus.
So this is a very interactive story type.
Yes,
Really
it's typical of West African storytelling. Very common in that culture. It's used to train people for rhetoric. It's used to bring life to moral standards and social norms that are negotiated within a community and renegotiated through story.
Really interested. Are there examples of that that a Western audience would be familiar with? Like as a sort of touchstone point?
If you're familiar with a calypso song, Wife and Mother. Man goes out on a boat is sinking. Who does he save, his wife or his mother?
Okay, interesting. So that's a call and response song, I'm guessing.
No, it was recorded by Lord Kitchener.
Okay.
Look it up on YouTube.
Yeah, very interesting. Okay, cool. Well, I'm putting that on my list to check out later. Very cool. So that was the dilemma structure.
Yes.
You
want to do the riddle structure, Chris?
Very closely related is the riddle structure. It's more specific, highly more specific. Again, yes, it's a cognitive dissonance. That is what a riddle is. It creates cognitive dissonance, and it's about the resolution of that dissonance. Whether you go on a quest, whether you have a realization, whether you're having to figure out a trickster, whatever it is, you're coming to that harmony, having been sort of put into disharmony by being faced with it. Classic, the Sphinx. You know, that's a classic example. And riddles, they're things that we throw out for fun, but also can be huge parts in quests. And they're really, it's such a great tool. And the advice I've always said is, a friend of mine is, you look up riddles and people for under 10-year-olds, and it still takes an hour for the group to get through it.
Yep.
But yeah, essentially a riddle is cognitive dissonance reharmonized, essentially.
Nice. I like that.
There's that wonderful scene in The Hobbit where there's the riddle exchange between Bilbo and
Gollum and Bilbo,
Gollum.
yeah.
And there's something that Tolkien puts in there. Maybe the listeners can remind me of it because I've forgotten it, but it's a magical line, something about the ancient riddles that people fear to tell because their magic is so great, something like that.
Wow.
There is something of real primal magic in riddles because they deal with substance at its most basic. The riddle structure always deals with questions like, who am I? What am I? You get all the attributes, you get all the descriptors, But what the essence of the thing is, that's what you're seeking.
Yeah.
Very nice.
I think that's true of everything except my sister is a medieval historian, and a lot of Anglo-Saxon riddles are very filthy. So I would say in general they are about the human state, but some of them are more about like the human state, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the
But
thing
yes,
is,
absolutely.
Janet, that plays on exactly the same trope, exactly the
Yes.
same formula, because they will always, the bawdy riddles will point out the substance,
Yes.
but it isn't what it is, or it isn't what it
Absolutely. It's
seems
all
to be.
about
It's
that
a kind
that
of
sort of
trickster riddle.
implied misunderstanding. Exactly.
So,
Yeah.
you thought it was that? Nah.
You
Go away.
filthy-minded person. It was a
Exactly.
key, obviously.
A lovely example of how you can throw a trickster into the riddle as well. So it's a great container. A great container. Like you said, a formula. That's a really nice way of putting it. These are all little formulas that you're just, it's like your kitchen cabinet. You've just got these little formulas that you can just pull out when you need them. What do we have next? Voyage and Return.
Mm-hmm.
See, I like this one. This is classic Narnia. And
I was going to say, this is Portal Fantasy right here. That's what that is. Yeah.
This is essentially, we have the beginning, we have a problem, a bit like a quest. But the difference here is that you transition into a different dimension. And that's really important. You have a crossing of a threshold. And that threshold is blocked to you until you complete your story. So it's the no return quest, essentially, until you have either gone through various different, if you go for a quest, a revelation, you can go through various different story structures to then return or be allowed to return to the original plane of existence or where you were, to then be in harmony once again, or to appreciate or to influence. This is one of my favorite ones. I'm actually writing a story about with this, using this as the container structure. And yes, I think with fantasy worlds, it's a really interesting one because it's going into a different dimension, but you're stuck there because the spell doesn't work or something's happened. But the key distinction is you're crossing a distinct threshold.
Yeah.
And that is particularly poignant, I think. And I think there's some great examples. It's very naturally freeing for story structures and fantasy and imagination, and you can go anywhere.
One of the things I would add to that brilliant exposition, Chris, is that the Voyage and Return structure, as I describe it, is very different to the Voyage and Return structure as Christopher Booker describes it. He sees the threshold crossing as a threshold crossing. For me, it's much more about a threshold crossing that the character has to undergo against their will. It's the shipwreck. It's the translation of Dorothy into the land of Oz against her will. And that whole process of working out whatever the solution is to the problem she faces there, or the character faces wherever they are, will give them the key to solving the problem they started with at the beginning of their journey when they set out.
Very interesting. And I was going to ask, is something like Gulliver's Travels considered a voyage and return for that reason, because it's voluntary?
Yeah, and very often I've found that they are literary stories. There are a few examples in oral traditions I've found. If anyone wants to prove me wrong, that's great. Love it. As I said, this is not the definitive thing. It's just a theory. The 18 structures are 18 story structures I've come across time and time again. They are 18 story structures identified to date. There may be others out there. Go, discover, find, explore. See what you find.
Well, I know that actually several people have already bought your book in the chat, so they will go and read and explore. Just before we continue, there has been a question about where can this book be bought if you do not want to buy it from Amazon, because there might be reasons why you might not want to buy from Amazon, which I 100% understand. Now, it can be bought directly from your website. Is that correct, Leon?
It can be, yes. If you want to support the author, then you can do it direct, and he will be very grateful.
going to say, and now you've met the author, so you know who's really cool and interesting. So if you are buying the book, then that would be a place. Now, I do have a question about shipping. How is that going to work for my beautiful international beans? Is that going to be okay?
It is going to be okay. And yeah, look up the website. It's all easy.
It's all in there.
Email me if there are problems. I will sort them.
There we are. We'll figure it out. If in doubt, message Leon. He's got your back. So where were we with the structures?
Perpetual motion.
There we go.
Yes. Your turn, Chris.
Oh, it's my turn.
Yeah.
Perpetual motion. This is the sort of the continual story. It's like the what's those? You know, when you pick up a magnet and it just keeps going. It's that motion. It's that bounce. It's the moon and the sun. It's that continual flow. We live in this perpetual balance, north to south in terms of poles, magnetism. There's always this flow and balance. A beautiful story Leon told me was about the moon and his two wives, and how his one wife is an excellent cook, and so the moon eats and eats and eats, and it gets really full and gets too full, so it goes across the sky to beat his other wife, who's talks and talks and talks and talks and gets very hungry. And so there's this wonderful sense of just backwards and forwards, effortlessly but continually.
Amazing.
Then there is, as we've said, the creation myth structure, which simply flows. I think we have one more structure.
Just before we go for the last one, I want to ask about creation myths, because I have a whole bunch of world builders who want to know more about creating cosmologies. What are your tips from the creation myth on that? Because cosmology is really important for world building very often, you know, creating these narratives of where the worlds came from, where things within the worlds came from. What are your thoughts on that, creating cosmologies?
Let me answer it from a story structure point of view, and Chris, you take it from a content point of view. From a story structure point of view, if you look at creation myths from the oral tradition, and one of the most interesting ones was creation myth I came across in an article by a storyteller who was given the story when he was very young. It had 3 layers. He forgot it until something happened in his life. Somebody died, or he had to go back to his homeland, and boom, the story had been planted like a seed, and it was there, ready to respond to a situation he had faced, and it made sense. As a result, he didn't want to lose it. He wrote it down. Oral tradition holders do not do this usually, but he did. And interestingly, it had these 3 stages. The world was created, and then it fell into a cosmic soup. And then from that cosmic soup, a second stage emerged. And then from that second stage, something happened which was nearer what it was going to be, but then it didn't quite make it. And in the third stage, that's when people emerge. Very often, the most important thing is either this 3-step or a 2-step. In ancient Chinese culture, you have 2 creator gods, Fuxi and Nuwa. They are husband and wife, brother and sister. They are joined at the waist. They have intertwining serpentine tails that interlink, if you see visual descriptions of them. She carries a compass that draws circles. He carries a set square that symbolizes right angles and geometric shapes that are linear. It is the interaction of those energies, the yin and the yang. They are balancing, co-creating forces that underlie nature. And the whole of cosmology, the whole of world building is about whether one side dominates or the other, and how that then unfolds.
Fascinating. That's so interesting.
But how does it work in practice if you are
in practice
creating?
I think when it comes to creating, it's great to know the structures, but then to try and go through them doesn't always work for me. I like to remember that we are always living in a creation myth. It is continually going. So to begin with, you're in it. There's no ins and out. It's happening. Then we have I suppose what's interesting is how the order of structures or which ones appear more regularly. Transformations, very soon on after a creation myth because of this perpetual duality of forces, the contraction, the expansion, the negative, positive. And then generally it seems how I like to work is I like to start quite broad and then feel the sort of, is it more of this? Is it more of that? Where's it going through? And then they sort of have stories themselves and they have their own little revelations. And then it sort of has layers and it gets further. And you're sort of working with this I look at it like this, it's very narrow, but it gets broader and broader and broader as you go up. And then what happens is generally you're just going to do a mix of different structures. There's going to be quests, there's going to be revelations, there's going to be transformations. So you're just feeling into almost the tools by which the creation myth keeps creating. That is what it is. And I would recommend choose some of your favorite authors who've done world buildings and just have an analysis and you'll see the structures there. You'll feel it. And then it's less about how do I do it? And it's more like, how can I embrace my own innate storytelling? And with this knowledge that I can then chart a sort of keep it as simple as possible and as small as possible, because then you can go really broad later on. So if you can get the absolute fabric down, memorize it, you know your story, you know your world. And then it's just about following the path, because that's one thing Leon's told me, is that you just follow the path and it starts to write itself. And I would say, do the creation myth, feel into it, have a lot of fun, go really broad, and then look at, okay, what paths are we going to get my players to follow? What paths are important? Because you're then pinpointing a moment in time and you're saying, okay, in this particular time, there's this particular imbalance, there's this particular activities, because as much as it would be great to go, the D&D is going to start from the creation myth, it would be a very long campaign.
Yes, absolutely.
So yeah, go super broad, keep it really tight, and then it will kind of happen. I think the best thing about D&D is that the game unfolds in the game, and you're continually sort of driving and repairing the motor at the same time, which is both the excitement and also the pain. I know that's what keeps me going as a DM for my group, is that I enjoy the tension that comes with that. So yeah, that's what I would say. So we're always living, these are all innate, and it's just getting a bounce and a feel and just keeping it simple.
Trust the story, trust the energy, trust the shape. Sorry, Janet.
Yeah.
No,
and use references. Look at your favorite writers. They use exactly the same things. We have the benefit now of being able to visualize. And that for me is a great marker, and that's helpful.
Amazing. Well, I must do at least some audience questions, or they will rebel, but I know that there is one final story structure. So let's have it.
Leon, you taking it away?
Let's do it together. I am the Chinese story structure. I am the ground, the dynamic ground of all story. I have yin and yang in balance in the middle. What do I have at north, south, east, and west? Chris, tell me.
Well, when, as all things, you always emerge in the spring. We always emerge in the spring. And it's from the spring of life, the beginnings. The seed grows, its whole innateness starts to unfold as it sort of expands to its full potential. And then, as always, what follows spring is summer. And it is in summer that we have the division, the first breaking above the ground, where the seed managed to penetrate. And it becomes the beginning of a stalk, of a flower, of a tree, whatever it is. And it's that begins to grow. And it's in that point that we move into the next season, the season of autumn. It is in autumn that we have the division as
separation.
The separation, apologies. We have the separation. The branches start to form even further from the trunk. The leaves begin to form. And then those leaves ultimately begin to fall off We have the first visual feeling of division, of something going into a next cycle of transformation to help the overall transformation, its grander plans, whatever it is. If it's a great oak, it has many, many years to flourish, but it must go through this process. And then it comes into the final season, the winter, the return, the part where it goes dormant, when things go still, to get ready before they spring forward once again.
I am the, sorry.
Go on, carry on.
I am the creation myth. I am all story structures. I am the Chinese story structure, it's Chinese circular structure. In the East, I am wood. I am emergence. In the South, which is at the top, I am fire. I am division. In the West, I am metal, which can never be liquid and solid at the same time. Separation. And at the bottom, I am north. I am water returning to the source. At the center, from which all of these expand from, and to which all return, I am earth, yin and yang in balance. Yin and yang energies flourish and rise around the circle, mapping the interchange of energies that gives rise to the seasons. Sunny side of the mountain, shady side of the mountain. It is one mountain. It is one whole. It is one world.
Amazing. Beautiful. So, 18 story structures to choose from. Some of them naturally lend themselves to speculative fiction. We've talked about Voyage and Return, which is so perfect for portal fantasy. We've talked about The Quest, which is the bread and butter of so many fictional stories there. Folks, I do recommend this book. It has been very fascinating to read. It is a very different approach to storytelling than I was used to. And when I started reading it, I'm not gonna lie, it started talking about energies, and I was like, really? We're talking about energies now? And as I read more, I was like, oh, I get this. We're talking about a slightly different thing here, and I do understand. So, again, I am the plottiest plotter that ever did plot. And I did find this book very useful. If you are a pantser, I think you will also find it incredibly useful because of the way it talks about flow and sort of the sort of the big beats of stories. I think using this as a map as you are writing will be very helpful for interpreting what you've already written and helping you figure out where it's going next. I do think that that will be very useful as well. And as we've already discussed, many applications for DMs. You know, being able to swim within a narrative and identify what it is that your instinct is telling you to do. That's something that's incredibly valuable for GMs. Understanding, you know, the topography of the story and like why you feel like you need to introduce a character right now, that gives you so many tools to tell a better story, to you know, create more compelling narratives with your players as well. So yeah, very cool stuff, I will just say. Any guidelines on introducing side plots using this structure, asks Hugh Pierre.
In terms of novels or RPGs or just I suppose generally if it's a side plot, it's a quest. You know, it's generally a quest, and because it's a problem, you're just trying to solve a problem. I suppose there's a difference between, are you introducing it like mid-game, last minute, had a thought, let's go, or is it more sort of tactically sort of dropped in there? Yeah, my instinct is generally you'll do a quest or a trickster or something like that. Is generally, you know, a side quest innately is to either get something and bring it back, or it's to pad out time, it's to add a bit of flavor. Maybe there's something you forgot to introduce. But generally, yeah, it'll be a quest, and then you'll how you play that will be up to you. Yeah,
Wonderful.
It'll be a quest. Yeah,
it will always be related to a character in a particular situation, a who, when, where, at a particular time, particular place, with a particular set of circumstances.
I think that's a really key point. If you can make your side quests character specific, that's a really good tension to throw into a group, because then you can be like, one of them's going to, sometimes group discussions, they don't know what to do, they want to do together. I think it's a great way of initiating side quests by just giving it to one of them, kind of making them either feel special or have to work for it, which is a nice way, because then it's not you telling them to go on a side quest, it's them. Have they got the desire and the will? Is their character aligned to that? Is that what they want to push through? Because one of the great things I think about the story structure stuff is you also see that a lot of the players are having their own story. They have a story they want to live. They've created this character, they've invested a lot of time and energy, and they really embody that, and they want to honor that. So you're kind of helping them complete their stories. And if you understand that innately, you can see it, and you can leave them breadcrumbs. And that's what I think that's a great thing about side quests. You throw in these extra breadcrumbs.
Really interesting. Very cool. Okay, well, folks, we are past time. So I'm sorry to those of you who asked questions that didn't get answers. But yeah, maybe you can shoot them to Leon or Chris. You can find them over on Twitter as well. You can find that via their websites, and you can shoot them some questions and get some answers live on the interwebs. So one more time, Leon, can you remind me who you are, what you do, and where we can find you?
I am Leon Conrad. I swim the sea of story, and I love helping people understand and get to play with story structures better. You can find me on the web, leonconrad.com.
Wonderful. And Chris, can you remind us who you are, what you do, and where we can find you?
Yes, hello, my name is Chris Chilton. I'm an aspiring writer and entrepreneur. You can find me on my website, chrischilton.co. I have a few blogs posted on there, but please feel free to get in touch via Twitter as well. Happy to answer your questions. Yeah, look forward to hearing from you.
Fantastic. Well, beautiful beans, we will see you next week on Friday talking about world building matriarchies with Professor Lynn Foxhall, who happens to be my mama. We thought that would be a fun little Mother's Day celebration.
Very nice.
So that's going live on Friday at the normal time, and on Saturday it is, of course, Play May. So make sure you tune in at 8 a.m. Eastern, 1 p.m. Eastern, and goodness, 5 p.m. Eastern for one-shots run by our community, written by our community, played by our community, with our community, for our community, right here on our channel. That's all going live next week. And yeah, it should all be a great time. We are going, if you're over on Twitch, on a raid. If you're on YouTube, you can hop over to twitch.tv/Rookery Publications, where they are live right now with Gareth L. Powell, a much celebrated best-selling author who's talking about his work in sci-fi and fantasy. So yeah, I feel like that would be a really good time. If you want to keep the party going, make sure you shout out Light Up the Forge to let them know that we sent you. And in the meantime, make sure you grab your hammer and go world build. Bye, everybody. Good night.